I'm Abigail, 29, female, and my sister just asked why I was at our mother's birthday dinner because she didn't think it was my year. I stood there, in the bright, cheerful kitchen that I had helped pay to renovate, and felt a decade of quiet resentment finally harden into something unmovable. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, turned around, and walked out of the house, leaving a family I no longer recognized behind me. 30 minutes later, as I sat in the quiet of my own apartment, their grocery order for the week was canceled. Their Netflix account was gone. Their Uber Eats was blocked, and their shared, unlimited data phone plan was downgraded to the bare minimum. When my sister's inevitable, panicked message came through, "None of the cards are working." I smiled again and typed a reply that would end an era. To understand why I walked out of my mother's birthday celebration without so much as a word, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a slow erosion, a foundation that had been built crooked from the very beginning. On the surface, we were a normal family. A father, David, a mother, Linda, and 2 daughters, me and Chloe. But beneath that surface, we operated on an unspoken system of checks and balances, where I was the checkbook and Chloe was the reason to spend. Chloe is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment she was born, she was bathed in a different kind of light. While I was quiet, studious, and responsible, Chloe was a firecracker. She was loud, charming, and endlessly charismatic. She could flash a smile and convince you the sky was green. Our parents were utterly captivated by it. They saw her as the embodiment of life and excitement, while I was seen as the stable, reliable, and frankly, boring older sister. I was the bedrock, but Chloe was the statue they built on top of it. No one ever throws a party to celebrate the bedrock. The favoritism was never overt enough to be called out in a single, dramatic confrontation. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a pattern woven so deeply into the fabric of our lives that pointing it out felt like questioning the very nature of our existence. I remember my 10th birthday. I had wanted a specific bright blue bicycle with a basket on the front. I'd circled it in the catalog for months. When my birthday came, my parents presented me with a set of encyclopedias and a savings bond. "A bicycle is a toy, Abigail," my father had said, adjusting his glasses. "But knowledge and financial security, that's an investment in your future." I was 10. I didn't want to invest in my future. I wanted to ride a bike with my friends. 3 years later, for Chloe's 10th birthday, they rolled out that exact same bright blue bicycle, this time with pink and purple streamers tied to the handlebars. When I quietly pointed out the discrepancy, my mother just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, you were always so much more mature. Chloe needs the encouragement to get outside and be active." The message was clear. My desires were frivolous, while Chloe's were needs that required encouragement. This pattern continued into our teenage years. When I earned a scholarship to a prestigious university for my computer science degree, the celebration was a quiet dinner at home. My parents were proud, but in a distant, academic way. "That's our sensible Abigail," my dad said, patting my shoulder. "We never had to worry about you." When Chloe, 2 years later, scraped by with a C average and got into a local community college to study communications, they threw a massive backyard party. All their friends were invited, and they toasted to Chloe's bright future and people skills. I spent most of the party refilling chip bowls and clearing away empty cups, feeling more like a caterer than a family member. Later that year, Chloe called me in a panic from a party an hour away. She'd been caught with an open container in her car and was facing a hefty fine and a license suspension. "You have to help me, Abby," she cried into the phone. "Mom and Dad will kill me." My parents didn't kill her. They called me. It was my responsibility, they explained, to use some of my savings from my part-time campus job to pay her fine. "She's your sister," my mother said, her voice laced with that familiar tone of disappointment, as if my hesitation was a personal failing. "She made a silly mistake. You're the one who's good with money. It's what families do. We support each other." I paid the fine. Chloe barely thanked me and complained for a week about having to attend a mandatory driver's safety class. My parents never paid me back. The financial expectation only grew after I graduated and landed a great job as a software developer. My starting salary was more than my father had ever made, and suddenly I wasn't just sensible Abigail, I was the family bank. It started small. Can you pick up the groceries on your way of? Honey, we're a little tight this month. Then it was, the internet bill is in your name, it's just easier if you pay it. Soon, I was covering their phone plan because I could get a better family rate. I added Netflix so Dad could watch his documentaries, then Spotify for Chloe's endless playlists, then the premium grocery delivery service so Mom wouldn't have to strain her back. Each expense was added with a casual, "Oh, would you mind?" That made it impossible to refuse without seeming selfish and cruel. I was paying for the infrastructure of their lives, and yet I felt increasingly like a stranger within them. They would talk about vacations I wasn't invited on, funded by the money they were saving because I was paying their bills. Chloe would post pictures on social media of her and her friends at expensive brunches, wearing new clothes, and I knew exactly where the disposable income was coming from. It was coming from me. The ultimate betrayal, the event that defined my year, happened 6 months ago. I broke off my engagement to Mark, my partner of 5 years. It was the hardest decision of my life. We had simply grown into different people, wanting different things. It was a mutual, albeit heartbreaking, separation. I needed my family. I needed their support, a shoulder to cry on, a quiet presence to remind me I wasn't alone. Instead, I got judgment. Chloe, who had always been superficially friendly with Mark, took his side immediately and with a shocking ferocity. "I can't believe you did that to him, Abby," she told me over the phone, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mark is so much fun. You just kept him cooped up all the time with your boring routine." My parents, ever the conflict avoiders, echoed her sentiment in their own quiet way. "Well, Mark was always so lively," my mother said wistfully. "He really brought a spark to our family gatherings." They didn't just take his side, they absorbed him into the family in my place. They started inviting Mark to Sunday dinners. Chloe would post photos of them all together, her, my parents, and my ex-fiancé, out at a restaurant, smiling and laughing, with captions like, "Family time is the best time." They were performing the happy family life for the world, with my ex playing the role of the fun-loving son they always wished they had, while I was left to piece my life back together alone. They didn't just erase me, they replaced me. The pain of that was a physical ache, a constant, dull throb in my chest that wouldn't go away. This was the context. This was the history. This was the wound I carried with me as I walked up the driveway to my mother's 60th birthday party, a party to which I had not received an invitation. The decision to go to my mother's party wasn't made lightly. For 2 weeks, I'd wrestled with it, the internal debate a constant, humming anxiety in the back of my mind. I knew I wasn't wanted. There had been no phone call, no text, no cheerful, floral-printed invitation in the mail like the ones they used to send before I became the family's invisible benefactor. The only reason I knew the party was even happening was because I'd seen Chloe's frantic posts about it on Instagram. Counting down the days until we can celebrate the best mom in the world. Linda's 60 #party time family first. The family first hashtag felt like a deliberate jab, a tiny, digital needle aimed directly at my heart. I saw the pictures of them picking out decorations, Chloe and my mom laughing as they held up silver and gold balloons. I saw a video of my dad in the backyard, proudly assembling a new patio bar that I knew, with a sinking certainty, had been purchased with a credit card I was still paying off. My best friend, Sarah, was adamant. "Don't go, Abby," she'd said over coffee last week, her expression firm. "Why would you subject yourself to that? They've made it clear you're not part of the inner circle anymore. You're just the service provider. Don't show up and give them the satisfaction of making you feel small." She was right, of course. Every logical part of my brain knew that attending would be an exercise in self-inflicted misery. But there was another part of me, a smaller, more stubborn part, that clung to a sliver of hope. This was my mother's 60th birthday. It felt like a monumental occasion, too significant to be ignored over what my parents would undoubtedly call a silly misunderstanding. Maybe if I showed up, gift in hand, a smile on my face, they would see me. Not the bank, not the problem solver, but their daughter. Maybe they would realize how much they had hurt me and we could finally talk about it. It was a foolish hope, the kind that only grows in the dark, but it was persistent. So, on the day of the party, I found myself standing in the middle of a high-end department store, searching for the perfect gift. I wanted something thoughtful, something that said, "I still care, despite everything." I settled on a beautiful, soft cashmere scarf in a shade of deep blue that I knew my mother loved. It was expensive, far more than I should have spent, but I justified it as a peace offering. A tangible symbol of my willingness to try. As the cashier wrapped it in shimmering silver paper and tied it with a pristine white bow, I felt a flicker of optimism. Maybe this would be the key. Maybe this gesture would be enough to unlock the door they had closed on me. I drove to my parents' house, the beautifully wrapped gift sitting on the passenger seat like a silent prayer. Their street was lined with cars, and as I pulled up, I could hear the faint sound of music and laughter drifting from the backyard. My stomach twisted into a knot. Every instinct screamed at me to turn the car around and drive away, back to the safety and quiet of my own apartment. But I forced myself to get out, to walk up the familiar stone path, the gift clutched in my hands like a shield. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The house was filled with the low hum of chatter from the backyard, but the front hallway was empty. I could smell the scent of grilled food and my mom's favorite perfume. For a moment, it was just home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and walked through the living room towards the back of the house. The sliding glass door to the patio was open, and through it, I could see the party in full swing. There were about 30 people there, family, friends, neighbors, my aunt and uncle. My father was manning the grill, laughing at something my uncle said. My mother was flitting between groups of guests, a glass of wine in her hand, looking radiant and happy. And then I saw Chloe. She was the center of attention, as always, regaling a small crowd with a story, her hands gesturing dramatically. She looked vibrant and carefree. And standing right next to her, laughing along with everyone else, was Mark. My ex-fiancé. He looked comfortable, at ease, like he belonged there more than I ever had. The sight of him, so seamlessly integrated into my family, was a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, and the knot in my stomach tightened until it hurt. The hope I had so carefully nurtured withered and died in that instant. Sarah was right. I was an idiot for coming. I must have stood there for too long, a ghost in the doorway, because my mother finally spotted me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise, or perhaps annoyance, crossing her face before she smoothed it over. "Abigail, you made it." Her voice was a little too loud, a little too bright. She walked over and gave me a brief, stiff hug, her cheek barely grazing mine. The scent of her perfume was cloying. "We didn't know if you were coming." It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't a welcome either. It was a statement of fact that hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, my voice sounding weak to my own ears. I held out the gift. "This is for you." "Oh, you shouldn't have," she said, taking the box. She didn't look at it, just placed it on a nearby table with the other presents, a small, polite smile fixed on her face. There was no warmth, no genuine pleasure. It was the kind of smile you give a stranger who holds a door open for you. She then immediately turned back to her guests, calling out, "David, look who's here." My father glanced over from the grill, gave me a quick, non-committal wave, and turned back to his conversation. No one else seemed to notice my arrival. It was as if I was a stone dropped into a river, causing a momentary ripple before the current flowed on, unchanged. I was there, but I wasn't really there. The feeling of invisibility was suffocating. I needed to get some air to escape the suffocating performance of it all. I decided to retreat to the kitchen, to get a glass of water and try to compose myself. It was there, in the room I'd helped design, under the recessed lighting I'd helped install, that the final, inevitable confrontation occurred. The kitchen was an oasis of quiet compared to the boisterous energy of the backyard. It was bright and modern, with white marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. I had spent a full weekend here with a contractor 2 years ago, mapping out the new layout for my parents as a Christmas gift. I'd researched the best refrigerator, the most efficient dishwasher, and the quietest range hood. I had paid for all of it. Standing there now, the room felt alien, a sterile monument to a relationship that was based entirely on transactions. I opened a cabinet to get a glass, my movements slow and deliberate. My reflection in the dark glass of the microwave was pale and strained. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, the tightness in my jaw. I was an intruder in my own family's home, a specter at the feast. I turned on the tap and filled the glass with cold water, letting it run over my fingers for a moment. Trying to ground myself. I just needed a minute. A minute to breathe, to push down the lump in my throat, and to figure out how to make a graceful exit without causing a scene. That's when Chloe walked in. She didn't see me at first. She strode into the kitchen with an air of purpose, her sandals clicking on the tile floor. She went straight to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of sparkling rosé. She was humming along to the music from the backyard, a picture of blissful ignorance. It was only when she turned around to grab a wine glass from the same cabinet I had just opened that she finally noticed me standing by the sink. She stopped dead. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of pure, unfiltered annoyance. It was the look someone gives when they find a cockroach in their pristine kitchen. Her eyes swept over me, from my simple dress to my tense posture, and a little smirk played on her lips. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice wasn't just questioning, it was loud, accusatory, and designed to be heard. It cut through the relative quiet of the kitchen like a shard of glass. I was so taken aback by the bluntness of her hostility that I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, the cold water glass slick in my hand. She took my silence as an invitation to continue. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms, the bottle of wine held loosely in one hand. "I mean, seriously," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Didn't you get the vibe this wasn't your year?" The vibe? The word hung in the air between us, so casual and yet so cruel. It summed up everything. My entire year of heartache, loneliness, and betrayal reduced to a vibe. The breakup with Mark, the way they had sided with him, the constant exclusion, the feeling of being replaced, all of it was just a vibe that I, the ever-sensible and clueless Abigail, had failed to pick up on. In that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a loud, dramatic snap, but a quiet, cold click, like a lock falling into place. The years of hurt, the thousands of tiny cuts, the constant feeling of being undervalued and used, it all coalesced into a single, clarifying point of stillness. The desperate need for their approval, the foolish hope for reconciliation, it all evaporated. All that was left was a profound, chilling clarity. I looked at my sister, truly looked at her. I saw the entitlement in her eyes, the casual cruelty in her smirk. I saw the golden child who had never once had to pay a bill, worry about the future, or face a single consequence for her actions, because I was always there, the silent, invisible safety net. And I realized she wasn't just being mean, she genuinely believed what she was saying. In her world, I was the outlier, the downer, the one who was ruining the vibe of their perfect family party. A strange sense of calm washed over me. The lump in my throat dissolved. The tension in my shoulders eased. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to argue or defend myself. There was nothing left to say. You can't reason with a brick wall. So I just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was small, knowing, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed the key to their own cage. I saw a flicker of confusion in Chloe's eyes. She had expected tears, or anger, or a pathetic plea for understanding. She was armed for a fight, and my placid smile completely disarmed her. Without saying a single word, I set my water glass down on the pristine marble countertop I had paid for. I turned my back on her and walked out of the kitchen. I walked through the living room, past the table holding my unopened gift. I didn't glance toward the backyard, where my mother was laughing, my father was grilling, and my ex-fiancé was celebrating with the family that was no longer mine. I just kept walking. I opened the front door, stepped out into the warm evening air, and pulled the door quietly shut behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the end. The drive home was a blur. The laughter and music from the party faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of my car's engine and the frantic beating of my own heart. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The hurt that had been a dull ache for months had sharpened into a weapon, and for the first time I felt an overwhelming urge to wield it. Chloe's words echoed in my head. "Didn't you get the vibe this wasn't your year?" She was wrong. She was so wrong. This wasn't going to be my year. This was going to be my life. A life that I, and I alone, controlled. When I got back to my apartment, the quiet felt like a sanctuary. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my purse on the floor, and walked straight to my home office. The room was my command center, the place where I worked, managed my finances, and, as it turned out, held all the digital strings to my family's comfort. Audible existence. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and powered on my dual monitors. The screens flickered to life, illuminating my face in the dimming evening light. A cold, methodical resolve settled over me. This wasn't about petty revenge, it was about reclaiming my power. It was about severing the ties of dependency that they had so happily wrapped around me. I was simply taking back what was mine. The first target was the easiest, Netflix. I opened my browser and navigated to the site. The welcome screen showed their profiles: David, Linda, Chloe, and my own, Abigail, which was rarely used. I clicked on my account settings. Under Manage Profiles, Chloe's icon, a picture of a character from some vapid reality show she loved, stared back at me. Under Subscription and Billing, my credit card number was listed, with the next billing date just a few days away. I didn't just remove my card. I clicked the big red button that read Cancel Membership. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel? Your membership will remain active until the end of your current billing period." I clicked Confirm Cancellation. A small, satisfying message appeared. "Your membership has been canceled." One down. Next, Spotify. I was the primary account holder on a family plan. 6 slots, 5 of them occupied by my parents, Chloe, my aunt, and even my uncle. I paid for it every month so they could have ad-free listening. I imagined Chloe at that very moment maybe putting on a party playlist she'd so carefully curated. The thought fueled my resolve. I opened the Spotify account page. It was a simple process. Change plan. I navigated to the free, ad-supported version and confirmed the switch. As of the next billing cycle, their uninterrupted musical bliss would be punctuated by loud, obnoxious commercials. Better yet, I went into the family plan settings and one by one removed each family member from the account. Linda has been removed. David has been removed. Chloe has been removed. The digital eviction was swift and silent. Then came the big one, the grocery delivery service. This was the subscription that made my mother's life significantly easier. Twice a week, a carefully selected order of fresh produce, high-quality meats, and all their favorite snacks and pantry staples would arrive at their door. I paid the annual membership fee and covered the cost of the groceries themselves, which averaged several $100s a month. It was an expense I had justified as helping my aging parents. But now all I could see was their complicity, their silent acceptance of Chloe's cruelty. I logged into the account. The upcoming order for Tuesday was already scheduled, full of items for my mother's post-birthday week. Gourmet cheeses, a bottle of her favorite wine, expensive steaks for my father. With 2 clicks, the entire order was canceled. Then, I went into the account settings, found the billing information, and deleted my credit card. Finally, I canceled the premium membership. Let them carry their own groceries. Momentum was building. I felt a sense of detached efficiency, like a surgeon excising a tumor. Uber Eats was next. Chloe used this constantly. Late-night food cravings, hungover morning breakfast orders, lunches delivered to her part-time retail job, I funded it all. I opened the app, went to the family profile I had created, and saw the history of her recent orders. Sushi, gourmet burgers, expensive coffee, all on my dime. A surge of anger, hot and sharp, cut through my cold calm. I didn't just remove my payment method. I deleted the entire family profile, and then, for good measure, I deleted the app from my phone. The final and most significant pillar of their comfortable life was the phone plan. I had them all on my account, an unlimited everything plan that cost a small fortune each month. It was the digital umbilical cord that connected us all. I logged into the provider's website, the interface familiar and easy for me to navigate. I saw their lines listed below mine: Mom, Dad, Chloe. I saw their data usage. Chloe's was astronomical, as expected for an aspiring influencer. I couldn't cancel their lines outright without their consent to port the numbers, but I could change the plan. I spent a few minutes reviewing the options. I found the most basic, entry-level plan available. It had a laughably small amount of high-speed data, after which it would be throttled to near unusable speeds. It had limited talk and text. It was perfect. With a few more clicks, I submitted the plan change, effective immediately. Their digital superhighways were now unpaved country roads. As I logged out of the last account, a profound sense of lightness washed over me. It was done. The digital demolition was complete. The invisible strings I had been paying for, the ones they had used to keep me tethered while pushing me away, were all cut. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the dark screens. The silence in my apartment was no longer lonely, it was peaceful. It was the sound of freedom. I stood up, walked to my living room window, and looked out at the city lights. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The constant weight on my chest was gone. I knew the fallout would be coming. The angry texts, the confused phone calls, the accusations. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready. I checked my phone. Nothing yet. They were probably still celebrating, blissfully unaware that their world was about to shrink significantly. I put my phone on silent, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on my couch waiting. The wait didn't last long. It was 9:47 p.m. when my phone screen lit up. The party must have been winding down. The first message was, as expected, from Chloe. Chloe trying to order a pizza. My card got declined. Did you cancel it? I read the message and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It was the first truly happy smile I'd had all day. Her card. Not my card that she was using, but her card. The entitlement was so deeply ingrained she didn't even see the distinction. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about explaining everything, about listing my grievances. But what was the point? Clarity, not complexity, was the order of the day. I decided to wait, to let the confusion simmer. 5 minutes passed. My screen lit up again. Chloe, seriously, Abby, what is going on? The Uber Eats card is gone too, and Netflix just logged out on the living room TV. Did you get hacked? The hacked theory was amusing. It was easier for her to imagine a nefarious, anonymous criminal than to consider that I, her boring, reliable sister, would ever be capable of such an action. The messages were becoming more frantic. Chloe, 1 minute later. Abby, pick up your phone. Mom is trying to look up that recipe on her iPad and the internet is crazy slow. She says the data isn't working. This was it. The dominoes were falling, one by one. The intricate web of convenience and comfort I had woven around them was unraveling, and they were utterly bewildered. I decided it was time to respond. It was time to answer the question from the title of the story they had written for my life. Chloe, 30 seconds later. None of the cards are working. What did you do? I took a deep breath, savoring the moment of absolute power. Then, I typed my reply, the one I'd been composing in my head ever since I walked out her door. Me, you were right. It isn't my year, it's my decade. The free subscription to my bank account has expired. Good luck. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. For a glorious minute, there was silence. I could almost feel the shockwaves radiating from my parents' house. Then my phone began to ring. The caller ID showed Chloe. I looked at the screen, watched it buzz angrily on the coffee table, and pressed the silence button. I wasn't going to engage in a screaming match. My message was my final word on the matter. She tried calling 3 more times in quick succession. When I didn't answer, the texts resumed, each one more hysterical than the last. Chloe, what is wrong with you? Chloe, you can't just do that. Mom and Dad need that stuff. "Chloe, you are the most selfish person I have ever met. After everything we've done for you." That last one almost made me laugh out loud. Everything they had done for me. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I put my phone face down on the table. A few minutes later, it started ringing again. This time, it was my mother. I hesitated. My anger was with all of them, but the thought of ignoring my mom's call still sent a pang of guilt through me. I let it ring, my heart pounding. It went to voicemail. She called back immediately. I sighed and answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Abigail, honey, what's going on?" Her voice was tight with forced calm, the kind she used when trying to mediate one of Chloe's teenage dramas. "Chloe is very, very upset. Did you two have a fight?" "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice even and cool. "It was your birthday party. I was there. Did you notice?" There was a pause on the other end. "Of course, I noticed, dear. It was lovely that you came by. But that doesn't explain why you've turned everything off. The grocery order for the week is gone. We can't watch our show." Her priorities were so painfully clear. Not "how are you?" Not "why did you leave so suddenly?" But our show and our groceries. My pain was an inconvenience. The loss of her streaming service was a crisis. I decided I no longer wished to pay for those services, I said simply. "But why?" she asked, her voice laced with genuine confusion. "We had an arrangement." "No, Mom, we didn't," I replied, the frustration I'd held back for years finally seeping into my tone. "An arrangement is mutual. You had an expectation that I would silently fund your lifestyle while being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. That expectation is now void." "That is not true, Abigail," she said, her voice rising. "We love you. You're being overly sensitive. Chloe just has a different way of expressing herself." "A different way of expressing herself?" I repeated in disbelief. "She asked me why I was in your kitchen. She told me I should have gotten the vibe that it wasn't my year. That's not a different way. That's cruel. And you and Dad just stood by and let it happen, just like you always do." "We didn't hear," she started to lie, but her voice trailed off. She knew she was on shaky ground. "Abigail, this has gone far enough. Whatever you're trying to prove, you've proved it. Now please just turn everything back on. Let's not ruin the end of my birthday." Ruin the end of her birthday. My entire world had been shattered by them for months, but me canceling a Netflix account was what was going to ruin her day. The last vestiges of guilt I felt vanished. "The services will not be turned back on," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't a game, Mom. This is my life. Goodbye." I hung up before she could reply. My hands were trembling slightly, but I felt a surge of adrenaline. The phone rang again almost instantly. It was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. I knew his approach would be different, less emotional, more practical, but just as dismissive of my feelings. His text came through a minute later. "Dad, Abigail, your mother is very distressed. This is not a mature way to handle family disagreements. Call me back so we can sort this out logically." Logic, he wanted to use logic. There was no logic that could justify their behavior. I turned my phone completely off. For the rest of the night, I would be unreachable. I made more tea, curled up on my couch with a book I'd been meaning to read for months, and for the first time since my engagement ended, the quiet in my apartment felt like peace, not emptiness. The storm was raging outside my door, but inside I was finally safe. I knew, however, that this was just the first wave. The real confrontation was yet to come. They wouldn't let this go. They would eventually show up at my door, and I would be ready. 3 days passed in blissful, uninterrupted silence. I had kept my phone off, communicating with the outside world only through my laptop. I let Sarah know I was okay, that I had finally done it, and her string of celebratory emoji replies was a welcome balm. I worked from home, losing myself in complex code, the clean logic of my job a stark contrast to the messy, irrational dynamics of my family. I ordered my own groceries. I watched whatever I wanted on my own streaming accounts. I was the sole administrator of my own life, and it was intoxicating. The peace was shattered on Wednesday evening. It was just after 7 p.m. when the intercom buzzed, the harsh, electronic sound jarring in the quiet of my apartment. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart leaped into my throat. I walked over to the panel and pressed the video button. The small, grainy screen showed 3 figures huddled in my building's entryway: my mother, my father, and Chloe. Of course. For a moment, I considered not answering. I could just pretend I wasn't home, but I knew that would only postpone the inevitable. They would wait. They would come back. This was a battle I had to face head-on. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed the talk button. "Yes," I said, my voice cooler than I felt. "Abigail, it's us," my mother's voice crackled through the speaker. "Let us in, we need to talk." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I replied. "Don't be ridiculous," my father's impatient voice cut in. "We are not having this conversation through an intercom. Open the door." I took a deep breath. This was it, the final showdown. "Fine," I said, and pressed the button to unlock the lobby door. I then walked to my apartment door, unlocked the deadbolt, but left the chain on. I was letting them in, but it would be on my terms, in my space. I heard their footsteps on the stairs. They probably avoided the elevator to strategize, and then they were there, standing in the hallway outside my door. I opened it just enough to see them. My mother looked distressed, my father looked angry, and Chloe looked like a thundercloud of pure fury. "Are you going to let us in?" Chloe snapped, trying to push the door open, but the chain held firm. "We can talk right here," I said calmly. "Abigail, for goodness sake," my mother pleaded, her hands clasped in front of her. "Please, let's just sit down and talk this through like a family." "Like a family?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "When did we start doing that? At the party where your other daughter told me I wasn't welcome? Or during the 6 months you spent having dinner with my ex-fiancé while I was grieving the end of my relationship alone?" My mother flinched, my father's jaw tightened. Chloe just scoffed. "Oh, get over it, Abby. Mark is a nice guy. It's not our fault you couldn't keep him." The cruelty of her words was so breathtaking it almost didn't register. But this time, it didn't wound me. It fueled me. "Take the chain off the door, Abigail," my father commanded, his voice low and dangerous. I looked at their faces, one by one. The distraught mother, the angry father, the venomous sister. They weren't here to apologize. They weren't here to understand. They were here to reassert control. They were a firing squad, and they had come to demand I hand them back the bullets. I unhooked the chain and swung the door open. "Fine," I said, stepping back. "Come in." They filed into my apartment, their presence immediately feeling like an invasion. Chloe looked around my clean, minimalist space with a disdainful sneer. My father stood stiffly by the door, his arms crossed. My mother wrung her hands, her eyes darting around nervously. "Okay," I said, remaining standing while they hovered uncertainly in my living room. "You wanted to talk, so talk." My father took the lead. "This little stunt of yours is over," he said, his voice clipped and authoritative. "You've made your point. You were upset. We get it. Now it's time to be an adult, turn everything back on, and we can put this behind us." I stared at him. "Put it behind us? Dad, this isn't behind us. This is it. This is the new reality. There is no behind. There is only from now on." "From now on?" Chloe spat, her voice rising. "From now on, what? You're just going to cut us off because your feelings got hurt. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? My phone barely works. I had to use the free Wi-Fi at a coffee shop just to post yesterday." The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of her complaint was staggering. I looked from her to my parents, who were remaining silent, tacitly endorsing her tantrum. "Embarrassing?" I repeated slowly. "You think this is embarrassing. Let me tell you what's embarrassing. It's working 2 jobs in college to save up money, only to have to use it to pay your sister's fines because she's too irresponsible to follow the law. It's getting a practical encyclopedia set for your birthday, and then watching your sister get the exact bicycle you wanted because she needs encouragement. It's paying for the Wi-Fi you use, the phone you post with, the food you eat, and the roof over your head, only to be told I'm ruining the vibe, by simply existing in the same room as you. With every word, I felt stronger. The memories I had buried, the injustices I had swallowed, were finally being spoken out loud. "That's not fair, Abigail," my mother said weakly. "We've always supported you." "Supported me?" I wheeled on her. "You supported my bank account. You never supported me. When I broke up with Mark, where was my support? You didn't just fail to support me, you actively supported him. You replaced me at your dinner table with the man who broke my heart. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To see pictures of your own family, laughing and celebrating with the one person who caused you the most pain you've ever felt." Tears were welling in my eyes, but they were hot, angry tears, not sad ones. My mother had the grace to look ashamed, her gaze dropping to the floor. My father, however, was unmoved. "It was an awkward situation," he said dismissively. "We were trying to be civil to everyone involved." "No," I shouted, my voice finally cracking. "You weren't being civil. You were being cowards. You chose the easy, fun person over the daughter who was hurting. You always choose Chloe, you always have. I was just the responsible one, the one you never had to worry about, the one who would just quietly handle things. I was the family utility, and you've all taken me for granted for my entire life." Silence descended on the room, thick and heavy. Chloe looked stunned, my mother was openly crying, and my father's face was a mask of stone. I had finally said it all. The truth, ugly and raw, was laid bare on my living room floor. "So no," I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, firm resolve. "I will not be turning anything back on. The Netflix, the groceries, the phone plans, that was all a privilege, not a right. And you have all shown me that you are no longer worthy of that privilege. Chloe, you're an adult. Get a full-time job and pay your own bills. Mom, Dad, I love you, but I cannot continue to enable this toxic dynamic. My financial support ends today." Chloe opened her mouth to say something, her face contorted with rage, but my father held up a hand. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger in his eyes. It wasn't understanding, not yet, but it was a flicker of something, perhaps recognition. He had heard me, really heard me. "I think we should go," he said quietly to my mother and Chloe. "But Dad," Chloe started. "Now." "Chloe," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He turned and walked out the door without another word. My mother, still weeping, gave me one last, pleading look before following him. Chloe stood her ground for a second longer, her eyes boring into mine, filled with a hatred that chilled me to the bone. Then she, too, turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And then there was silence again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a battle won, of a great weight finally lifted. I sank down onto my couch, my body trembling with the aftermath of the confrontation. I had done it. I had stood up for myself, and I had survived. The week after the confrontation was the quietest of my life. It was a strange, hollowed-out kind of peace, the kind that follows a massive storm. The earth is soaked, the trees are bare, but the air is clean and fresh. There were no angry texts, no pleading phone calls, no unexpected appearances at my door. It was as if a force field had sprung up around my life, repelling the chaos that had defined it for so long. I didn't know what was happening at my parents' house, and for the first time, I realized I didn't care. The constant, low-level anxiety I used to feel about their happiness, their comfort, their vibe, had vanished completely. My focus had turned inward. I started rediscovering the person I was when I wasn't playing the role of the dutiful daughter and financial provider. I spent a whole Saturday afternoon in a bookstore, buying a stack of novels just because their covers looked interesting. I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do but never felt I had the time for. I reconnected with old college friends, the ones who had slowly drifted away as my family life consumed more and more of my energy. About 10 days after the showdown, a single text message appeared on my phone. It was from my dad. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. "Dad, your mother and I have set up our own internet and phone plans. We would like to take you to dinner on Saturday. Just us. Chloe will not be there." The message was brief, factual, and devoid of any real emotion. There was no, "I'm sorry," no, "you were right." But hidden in its stark simplicity was a massive concession. We have set up our own plans. They had taken a step toward self-sufficiency. Chloe will not be there. They were acknowledging the core of the problem. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. A tiny, fragile olive branch. I thought about it for a whole day. Part of me wanted to say no, to maintain the clean break. But another part, the part that still loved the parents they could be, wanted to see if this change was real. I replied with a simple, "Okay." That Saturday, I met them at a quiet, neutral restaurant halfway between our homes. They both looked older, more tired. The initial conversation was stilted and awkward. We talked about the weather, about my work, about their new, much slower internet connection. Then, over a plate of calamari, my father cleared his throat. "Abigail," he said, looking me directly in the eye, "we have not been fair to you. We let our pride in your success turn into an expectation, and we let our worry over Chloe's difficulties turn into indulgence. We failed to see the dynamic we were creating. We are sorry." My mother reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her eyes were filled with tears. "We are so sorry, honey. When you said we replaced you, it broke my heart because I knew you were right. We were so caught up in the drama with Mark and Chloe, we forgot about our own daughter. There is no excuse for that." Hearing the words I had longed to hear for years was both overwhelming and strangely anticlimactic. The apology didn't magically erase the decades of hurt, but it cleaned the wound. It was the acknowledgement I needed to finally start healing. We talked for 2 more hours, more honestly than we ever had before. I learned that Chloe had moved out. After a massive fight with my dad about getting a real job, she had packed her bags and was now staying with a friend, giving them the silent treatment. I felt a pang of something, not pity, but a sad resignation. My freedom had come at the cost of the family's complete implosion. I laid out my new boundaries clearly. I told them I loved them, but our relationship could no longer be transactional. I would not be paying any of their bills. I would see them for holidays and dinners, but I would not be drawn into Chloe's dramas. My life was my own. To my surprise, they nodded and agreed. They seemed to understand. As I drove home from that dinner, I felt a sense of closure. The relationship with my parents was not fixed, but it was on a new, more honest foundation. The relationship with my sister was likely broken beyond repair, and I had to accept that. Some things can't be put back together again. My life now is quiet, and it is entirely my own. The pottery class is messy and wonderful. I'm terrible at it, but it brings me a joy I haven't felt in years. I'm planning a trip to Italy for the spring just for myself. I am no longer the bedrock for someone else's statue. I am the sculptor, the clay, and the finished piece all in one. My year, as Chloe so cruelly put it, is over. But my decade, the one I declared in that text message, is just beginning. It's the decade of Abigail, and the vibe is peaceful, it is strong, and it is free. For anyone out there who feels like the invisible support system in their own family, for anyone who feels more like a utility than a person, I see you. Taking back your power is terrifying, but the silence on the other side of that storm is worth it. You deserve to be the main character in your own story.